AngularJS is a structural framework to implement dynamic applications, and we use HTML as a template language, and extend HTML's syntax to express application components. Express application components. Okay, so this is the most important concept in AngularJS. So we can use HTML as a template language to implement different parts of application. So first of all, so this is the definition of AngularJS. So AngularJS features in AngularJS. So number of features is there in AngularJS. Data binding, and second one data binding, and it supports MVC framework. Support MVC framework. And third one and DOM control structures for DOM control structure for repeating or showing and hiding DOM elements like HTML elements. And the fourth one, support for forms and form validations. And attaching new behavior. Fifth one, attaching new behavior to DOM elements. So like we can create custom elements. So nothing but directives. Okay, so the concept is directives in AngularJS. Next, sixth one, and the filters. Next, seventh one, filters. Next, directives. Next, dependency injection. okay, dependency injection, and factories and services, factory and services, and 10th one, modules. Next, compilers, and the 12th one, templates. Okay, next 13, controllers. Next 14th, scope. So this is very most important feature. And 15th, expressions. Expressions. So these are most important features in AngularJS. So in the later classes we will discuss all about these things. Okay, all these about features. So data binding, MVC framework, and the DOM control, directives, dependency injection, factory service, modules, compilers, templates, controllers, and scope expressions. So one by one we can learn in the later classes. So these are the features in AngularJS. So AngularJS is a structural framework to implement dynamic applications. And HTML, we can use HTML as a template language. Okay, so we can create our own templates. You can create templates. You can divide one HTML form into the number of templates. Okay, by using HTML template language. So I have prepared document on AngularJS concepts. Document is okay. So this is the document of AngularJS. I have prepared this. So AngularJS is a structural framework for dynamic web applications, and HTML as a template language to extend HTML syntax to express our applications and components clearly. So we can divide HTML form into the number of components, okay, like templates, and we can include all of these things into the one form. And these features, MEC framework and a declarative user interface and data models, custom directives, filters, DOM manipulation, services, and factories, unit testing, and here number of features is there. So how we can start with AngularJS applications? So we have to download AngularJS library from AngularJS.org website. Okay, open this website. Okay, AngularJS.org, and after that you can download AngularJS library, or you can copy CDN file. Okay, already hosted file, Google CDN or Microsoft CDN or CDN JCDN. Any CDN file you can copy, otherwise you can download AngularJS.min.js file. So here AngularJS 2 versions available, AngularJS 1, AngularJS 2. So now we are learning AngularJS 1. Okay, so click on this. it will open pop-up. So you can copy this CDN file. Okay, already hosted file, Google CDN file. If you want to do download, you can select here zip and download here. Otherwise, you can select this minified and copy this library like jQuery. Okay, if you want to download JS file, you can download. Otherwise, you can copy this file. Okay, this is the latest version of AngularJS minified file. After copy this file, okay. So next thing is module. So this is very important topic to implement AngularJS applications. Without module, we can't do anything. Okay, a module is a container for the different parts of our application. Okay, module is a container. So we have to create module for every application, and based on that module, we have to implement other parts of our application. Okay, without module, we cannot implement other parts of our application. Okay. So if you want to implement controllers or services or filters or directives, anything in AngularJS application, we need this module. Okay, so the declaration is very easy and very easy to understand, and without module we cannot implement all these things in AngularJS. So Angular apps don't have a main method. Okay, AngularJS application don't have a main method like Java method. Okay, Java like a C sharp. Okay, mm, public static void main. Okay, args. So like that we don't have any main method. So module is the main method to run the AngularJS application. So instead, modules declaratively specify how an application should be bootstrapped. Bootstrapped means how we can run AngularJS application without main method. So this is the only one way to run the AngularJS application. The declarative process is easier to understand, and you can package code as reusable modules. Okay, so you can package and you can implement modules to reusable modules. The modules can be loaded in any order, okay, because modules delay execution. Okay, in any order we can write the code. Okay, there is no order to implement application. In any order you can write the code, and unit test is very easy in AngularJS. So AngularJS prefix. So here public variables and private variables is there. Already predefined variables in AngularJS. For public objects, okay, AngularJS prefixes names for public objects. For public objects, start with a single dollar and followed by object name, and private objects start with a double dollar. Okay, AngularJS public objects start with a single dollar, and private objects start with a double dollar. Next thing is directives. So after create the module in our application, machine should we have to implement directives. Okay, to continue with the other parts of our application. So this is also very important concept, directives. Okay, in AngularJS, number of predefined directives is there. Okay, otherwise you can create your own directives, that is custom directives in AngularJS. So that is also one concept in AngularJS, custom directives. I will explain that concept in later classes. So these directives are predefined directives like ng app, ng controller, ng model. All these are predefined controllers. So AngularJS directives are extended HTML attributes. Okay, directives are extended HTML attributes. Okay, we have to include these directives to the HTML elements. Extended HTML attributes with the prefix ng. Okay, starting prefix is ng, followed by directive name. So this is the core collection of directives you would use in your template code to build AngularJS application. Okay, must and should we have to use directives. So first directive is the basic and parent directive is ng app. Okay, to create the module. Okay, to create the module, so ng app is must and should. Without ng app, we cannot create module for application. So use this directive to auto bootstrap an application. Based on this ng app directive, we can create module for application. So after that, we can implement other parts of application. Okay, like controllers, services, filters, like this. Okay, this is the auto bootstrap for AngularJS application. The ng app directive designates root element of the application and is typically placed near the root element of the page. So so here ng app directive we can place in root element of the application. Root element means in body tag or in HTML tag. So anywhere we can place ng app directive to define the AngularJS application. Okay, without ng app directive we cannot define the AngularJS application. The ng app direct attribute or directive represents the AngularJS directive named ng app, and this directive is used to flag the HTML element that Angular should consider to be the root element of the application. Root element of the application means in body tag or in HTML tag. So add one HTML form. ng app. Okay, ng app example. So first of all, so create HTML form like a document type HTML header section and body section. So after that, you can copy CDN file. Okay, CDN file. Use script tag and source. Paste here. Close this tag. And after that, so we are implementing AngularJS application. So that must and should we have to define the AngularJS application. So AngularJS application means to define the AngularJS application, ng app directory is used to define the AngularJS application. So we can define that directive in HTML tag. Okay, in HTML tag or in body tag, here or here. Okay, so anywhere we can define like this. We have to define this directive to define the AngularJS application. Okay, this is called directive or attribute. So normally in real-time examples, their machine should define this ng app directive in HTML tag. So after that, after complete the ng app directive, next directive is ng controller. The ng control directive attaches a controller class to the view. Okay, to view the data from the database. Okay, to display the data from the database or to read the data from any JSON files or anything. So we need this controller, ng controller, to communicate with the database and to display the data from the database. This is the mediator between model and view. Okay, this control class to the view. Ng control directive defines the application controller. Okay, application controller, and this is used to display the view, okay, data in the HTML form. Okay, this is communicate with the view like a HTML form, and you can communicate with the database by using this controller. This is the mediator. So we have to define this controller in body section or any other div tag. Okay, in body section ng controller. Okay, so like this we can define ng controller. Okay, after that controller ng model. The ng model directive binds the value of HTML controls. Okay, ng model directive, okay, hold the HTML value, HTML controls values. Okay, ng binds the value of HTML controls like text box, okay, text area, and a drop down list and read a button list. Okay, so bind that values into the HTML ng model directive. Okay, hold that values in ng model directive. Okay, this ng model directive is used to pass these values into the database. Okay, text box values are drop down values. Pass to the database. Okay, so ng model directive, we can define this ng model directive in HTML controls. Input type equal to text box and value, not value, and placeholder. Okay, first name and ng model, and we have to define the variable, okay, fname, to hold the value, text box value. Okay, this text box value saves in fname variable, and after that we can pass this value into the database. Okay, this variable hold the text box value. Okay, hold the text box value, and next ng bind directive. This ng bind directive is used to display the values into the HTML controls. Okay, bind the values from the database. ng bind directive tells Angular to replace the text content of the specified HTML element with the value. Okay, to bind the value, okay, to bind the value into the HTML elements, we can use this ng bind directive. To display the output, okay, to display the output in HTML form, we can use this ng bind directive. So for example, so we have text box with ng model directive, Okay, this text box value saved in fname variable, okay, model variable. And after that I want to display the text box value in span. Okay, in span I want to display text box value in span, so that I can use here ng bind directive, ng bind equal to fname. Okay, text box value stored in fname variable, and immediately we can display that text in span. Immediately bind the value from the fname variable. So run this example now. Okay, so text box, first of all go to inspect, and you can check here. So for every element, class equal to ng scope is added. Okay, here for directives, ng control also class equal to ng scope, and for html tag also ng app class equal to ng scope is added. So because AngularJS internally attaches this class to bind the values or to display the values. And for text box classes, okay, class equal to ng present and ng untouched, ng valid. Okay, these three classes is added by internally. So after that you can type here. So error is there. Failed to load resource. The server respond. Failed controller. Okay, we don't need this. Okay, to display the, okay, for sample examples we don't need this. To, if we define the controller ng controller, must and should we have to implement controllers, otherwise we can't display the output. So remove this and refresh this example, and now you can check here. Okay, what you type in text box, the text box is binding in span. Okay, so like this we can hold the value. Okay, we can hold the value by using ng model directive, and we can bind that value by using ng bind directive. So this is the most basic, okay, basic directives: ng app, ng controller, and ng model, ng bind directives. And after that,
Please tell me about ng once again.
hmm?
Could you please tell me about ng controller once again?
ng controller
Yeah.
is the mediator between to read the data from the database. Okay, this is the mediator to display the data into the HTML form, or we can interact with the database by using controller. Okay, controller takes the response, okay, takes the request or take the response from the database.
So now, like whatever the data that ng model got it from the text, so this controller helps to insert this ng model data into the database, and ng bind will
ng bind directives is the scope variables. Okay, that is normal scope variables. Okay, so ng model, this is the variable to pass the text box value into the database or to display uh, that value in the same HTML form. We can use this. Okay, so this is the variable to pass the text box value into the database.
Okay.
Okay, so this is for only save the text box value in one variable. Okay, so we are using this variable to display directly in the HTML form. Okay, after you implement the ng controller, so we can use this fname variable, okay, to insert into the database. Okay, in this example we are not implementing ng controller, so that I am removed and this and displayed in the span. So after these four directives, ng click directive, from here we have to implement ng control directive also. Okay, suppose here uh, for example we have one button. So when you click on the button, we can display some content into the text box, or we can display some content in div element. Okay, by using controller. How we can bind the value from controller into the HTML element. Okay, so when you click on the button, how we can implement, how we can run the AngularJS function, and how we can bind the value from controller to HTML element. So that is ng click directive allows us to specify custom behavior when the element is clicked. So here take one button value get my name. Okay, and close this button. Okay, uh, so here, so we have to implement the AngularJS application module, and we have to implement controllers also. So use script tag and where my app is the variable. My app is the variable, and angular dot module comma. Okay, so this is the creation of module for every application. Okay, we have to give here application name. Machine should define the application name in the ng app directive. Okay, my app or any name we can use here. My app, and this name use here. Okay, to define the AngularJS application module. Okay, based on ng AngularJS application name, we are defining the application module. Based on this module, we can implement remaining concepts. Okay, remaining parts of our application, like controllers or services, okay, or templates or anything we can implement using this module only. So without this line, this statement, we cannot do anything. And to implement the controller, give controller name. Okay, my ctrl, my controller, and I want to implement this controller. So use my app is the module. Okay, module dot controller. Next, define here controller name, comma, function. Okay, so this is the declaration of controllers. Okay, here using scope is the public variable. Okay, here public objects with single dollar and private objects with double dollar. So public object used here. This is the predefined object. Scope. The scope is uh, used to call the scope variables into the controller, and by using scope we can access the scope variables and the scope functions from the HTML form. To access the scope variables, to access the scope variables or scope functions from the HTML form, so we have to use the scope variable. So otherwise, next, so when you click on the button, so we need to execute some function in controller. So for that, ng controller ng click directory is there. Okay, my function. Okay, in normal jQuery or JavaScript, input type equal to button value click. Okay, on click or okay, in JavaScript we are used on click event, right, to run the JavaScript function. To run the JavaScript function, so we use it like this to run the JavaScript function. But in AngularJS, don't use events. Okay, on click, on mouse over, on mouse out, like this. Don't use like this. In AngularJS, for everything, controllers is there. So this is the controller to run the JavaScript function. Okay, ng click. So when you click on this button, scope dot my function equal to function. Okay, so based on scope variable public object, okay, based on this predefined public object, we can access public variables, scope variables and scope functions. Okay, this is the variable and this is the function. Scope, total this thing is scope. In the scope, this is the one variable and this is the function. So we can access functions and scope variables by using scope variable, scope here. So next, scope dot f name equal to my name is Varun. Okay, so this text will display in text box when you click on the button. Okay, so like this we can read the data, we can display data from controller. Okay, so ng model directive, hold the value. Okay, hold this value, and ng model directive is used to two-way binding. Two-way binding means we can bind the value from the controller, or we can pass the value to the controller ng model directive. By using ng model directive, we can bind the value from the controller, or we can pass the value to the controller. So that is two-way binding. That is called two-way binding in AngularJS. And next, ng click directive. Next, ng double click. Okay. So next, ng click. After completing ng click, ng double click. So this is also event for button. Okay, like event, double click event. So here ng double click directive to run the function. Okay, in JavaScript also we can define the functions like function equal to my function name. Okay, so like this, my function name equal to function. So like this we can define the functions in JavaScript also. Okay, normally we are defining function keyword with function name. Okay, so like this we are defining the functions in JavaScript, but we can define functions like this also. So based on this concept, we are defining the function here. Next, after complete the ng double click normal ng dbl click. Okay, when you double click on the button, it will display the output. Okay, for normal single click, no output, and double click, the output will display here. Next, ng repeat directive. So ng repeat directive repeat to repeats an HTML elements. Like if you want to display 100 records of employees information. Okay, so you need to repeat the elements, okay, HTML elements, to display 100 records, 100 employees information. Okay, ng repeat directive repeats an HTML element. This directive instantiates a template once per item from a collection. Okay, so each and every time one item will display. Okay, and one item, one template is created, and each template instance gets its own scope. Okay, separate scope is created for each and every record. So when the given loop variable is set to the current collection item, and index is set to the index numbers. So for example, to create one HTML form, ng repeat directive. So take one button, type equal to button, value, display employees, and ng click get employees function. Okay, and close this. So I want to display uh, like just for example for employees information. Okay, and copy this one. So here we have to define ng app directive my app, and in body ng controller my controller. So when you click on this button, we want to display for employees information. So here we can create one scope variable, uh, employees equal to create one object type variable, okay, object type variable for employees information. Okay, for employees information like first name, last name, email, phone number. First name, okay, first name equal to Varun, last name V, and email varun@gmail.com, comma, phone, for example number. So like second employee's information, first name Harsha, and last name Vardhan, comma, email harsha@gmail.com, comma, phone number. Again first name Prasad, last name D, and email prasad@gmail.com. Next phone number, for example number. Next first name Satish, last name S, and email satish@gmail.com. Next phone number, example number. Okay, so here for employees information, in normally in real-time example, this information will retrieve from the database. Okay, we have to retrieve the data from employees information from database, but in our sample example we created the variable object type variable, and this object variable contains four employees information. Okay, in real-time examples must and should we have to read the information from the database. So after that, so when you click on the button, So this function is executed and display this employees information into the scope variable dot my employees equal to scope dot employees. Okay, scope dot employees. So this is the variable. This variable contains 4 employees information and this is assigned to new variable. Okay, scope dot my employees. My employees is the new variable, scope variable. So assign it to into my scope variable, my employees. So I want to display this employees information in the table format. Table, table header, tr, td. In the first column, first name, second column, last name, third column, email, next td, phone number, and after that table body, uh, td, next td, next td. Okay, so 4 columns is there. So we have to, actually we don't know how many records in database. Okay, so that rows need to create dynamically. Okay, so for example in database, 1000 records or 10,000 records, it should be like this. So but we cannot create too much rows. Okay, so dynamically we need to create the rows, so that for this we have ng repeat directive to create the templates. Okay, automatically to repeat the records. Ng repeat directive to repeat the all records from the database and create the how many records is there in the database. That rows is created in the HTML form. Emp in my employees. Okay, you can check here. My employees is the scope variable and here my employees is the scope variable. So this variable name and this variable name should be same. Okay, so we are assigning this employees information into this variable. Okay, scope dot my employees. We are accessing this variable into this function. Okay, and assigning into this variable. So every time one record is getting into the emp variable, okay, emp variable, and display in the table columns. And each and every time one record is created, one row is created. Ng bind directive, ng bind directive, emp dot okay, first name, ngbind equal to emp dot last name ngbind equal to emp dot email ngbind emp dot phone number. Okay. So ng repeat directive automatically repeats, okay, this variable. Okay, how many records is there, that rows will be created here dynamically. So run this example. Hello.
In the same example, the same line,
Mm.
ng repeat emp in my employees.
Mm.
So the emp is the variable that just repeating in the same line, right? We didn't create that anymore.
Every record. Okay, first time when you when you start the repeat directive, uh, first record is getting into emp variable. After complete the first record, it will goes to again, like a for loop. Do you know for loop?
Yeah, yeah, I know.
Yeah, like for loop, it will take the records every time.
Okay. Like actually the doubt that I have is like just we're just writing emp, right? Usually we should treat it as var emp.
This is the emp dot first name, emp dot last name is the column names. Okay, so based on this column names, we are binding value into the table column.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so actually we don't know how many records in the database. Okay,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay, we cannot create that record, that rows, that number of rows. So that dynamically we have to create the number of rows based on the output, based on the employees, how many records is there. So actually in this example we created only 4 rows. Okay, but in real time examples, number of records is there.
Yes.
Okay, so that we have to repeat the, okay, we have to create the rows dynamically.
Okay.
Manually we cannot create a number of rows, so that dynamically create the rows by using ng repeat directive and display that records in the table. Okay, so run this. Okay, display employees. Okay, so all employees information is displayed here. So once go to inspect, see here in the first row, in the first row, for each and every record, one scope is added. Class equal to ng scope is added. So each template instance gets its own scope where the given loop variable is set to the current collection item. Okay, so each and every template, this is the template. Okay, each and every template gets its own scope. Okay, one scope is added where the given loop variable is set to the current collection item. Where the given loop variable is set to the current collection item. So from this collection, my employees is the collection. Okay, takes every time one record and attach to this column. Okay, ng binding. For columns, ng binding is added, and for rows, ng scope is added. Okay, so AngularJS direct in AngularJS internally attaches these classes to bind the value from the controller or to pass the values to the controller. Okay, so every time one record is created and a separate scope is added. Based on this scope, ng binding is applied. ng binding for ng binding, ng binding. So like this, number of rows is created and displayed in output. Next we can apply CSS styles, table, border collapse, table, tr, td, border, 1 pixel border, solid, black color border. Okay, so display applies. Okay, like this you can apply CSS styles also. So this is very important directive to read the data from the controller. Okay, and one more thing is index. Okay, if you want to display index numbers, you can use this dollar index public variable, a public object to display the index, like serial numbers. If you want to display serial numbers, td serial number, td ng bind dollar symbol index plus 1. Okay, index plus 1, every time one record, one value is increased. Okay, every time one value is increased. First time 1, from second row onwards 1 plus 1 is increased. Okay, so 1 2 3 4 5, like this it will increase the values. So index plus 1. Next, so AngularJS expressions. So AngularJS expressions just like ng bind directive. Okay, so AngularJS expressions are written inside double braces. Okay, double braces we have to use to bind the value. Okay, in this example, to bind the value from the controller, we are usually ng bind directive. Okay, ng bind directive we use it to bind the value, but we can use expressions to bind the value from the controller. Okay, so this expression also works like ng bind directive. An AngularJS expression binds data to the HTML the same way as the ng bind directive. So AngularJS will output data exactly where the expression is written. Okay, where the expression is written in the HTML form, in that place only display the output. Okay, expressions are used to bind application data to the HTML. Expressions are written inside double braces like this, and the expressions behave same way as ng bind directive. So expressions are very fast. Okay, very fast than ng bind directive. Okay, in real time also, in real time applications also, they are using only expressions to bind the values from the controller. Okay, so ng bind directive just small applications use it to bind the value. So but in real time and complex applications, they are using expressions. In the same example, how we can use expression to bind the values. So now we can remove these directives. Okay, so only rows and columns is there. So now directly we can use expression emp dot first name, emp dot last name, emp dot email, emp dot phone number, dollar index plus one. Okay, so like this we can use expressions to bind the values. Okay, in the same way we are binding the data. Okay, so in the bind directive also we can use, otherwise we can use the expressions also. So for simple, if you want to display some content in the span or paragraph, you can use scope dot my content equal to this is my example paragraph. So I want to display this content in paragraph. So in the paragraph we can use okay my content. Okay, this variable we are using here. Okay, this is my example paragraph. So like this we can bind the values. And if you want to do mathematical operations, directly we can do the operations, mathematical operations in the expressions. Mm, 10 plus 45. Okay, 10 plus 45. So we can display this 45. 10 plus 45 means output is 55. We display in the output. Okay. So mathematical expressions should be like this. Next. Okay. So within max 7 to 8 days, we can complete all these things. Okay. So that's it for today. I have